Hey everyone, this
Welcome to the Freedom to Thrive, a podcast that dives deep into the fight for abolition, reimagines justice, and explores the intersection of immigration and the criminal legal system, starting with this series that we call Crimmigration, brought to you by Freedom to Thrive, an organization here to challenge the status quo, dismantle oppressive systems, and build a world where our communities can truly thrive. Each episode in the series, we sit down with powerful voices from organizers to activists, community leaders, and allies who are leading the charge for change. We'll unpack the real impact of our current systems, discuss the importance of abolition, and share the tools, strategies needed to organize for a more just future. Whether you're new to this movement or a seasoned advocate, the space is for you. Our work is led and informed by people directly impacted by the immigration or prison system, who have been or have had loved ones deported or locked up. Their experiences with crimmigration is also impacted by the intersections of race, gender, housing, education, and labor. Join us to decriminalize, reparate, and liberate our communities. This is Freedom to Thrive. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Freedom to Thrive podcast. This is episode 2. My name is Kay Good. I'm the We Rise consultant coordinator with Freedom to Thrive, and I'll pass it over to Edwin.
Hey everyone, hey. Here we are again. My name is Edwin Argueta. I'm a Boston researcher organizer for Freedom to Thrive. I'm going to kick it over to Karim.
Hi, my name is Karim Golden. I'm Freedom to Thrive's New York organizer, local activist, and I'm going to pass it over to my friend DJ C-Mob.
What's up, everybody? C-Mob Husseini here, he, him, his. I'm the Portland organizer here in the Pacific Northwest, the only Pacific Standard Time holding it down today. Welcome to our podcast, The Freedom to Thrive. I think where we're going to start off today was we kind of wanted to run through a few things with you guys. We're going to have a little bit of fun with our format. We have a couple segments that we're going to close out with, but I think the meat of our sandwich over here is going to be, let's decompress the election. But I don't think a lot of folks are going to hear what they think they're going to hear. There's a lot of avenues and places people could take when it comes to voting, and we're not necessarily going to talk about like who, how, what, and why we voted a certain way. First off, we're a C3 organization, so we're not talking about like supporting a candidate, but it's more or less talking about like, okay, yeah, Trump won. We're here again, and we've been here before, but you know, what is there to expect with this candidacy? There's been talks about, how he's going to really change the economy and the turmoil that could come from that with the tariffs. More than half this country didn't want to listen to what was right or wrong about that. And outside of that, I think even bigger, and the reason why we exist is to be able to organize and support those in the that are being criminalized in this immigration system that we call the Crimmigration system. And so I think just kind of wanted to start off with like a little bit of a list over here. These are things that he promised he was going to actually do. This is stuff that combines Project 2025, is the rhetoric that he's been espousing and kind of spitting and putting out there. And Yeah, without further ado, let's talk about this. Threats to immigration is kind of the very first, is the largest topic for us. And I've seen it before. A lot of us were organizers over here a few years ago when it came to issues within the criminal legal system, or even how USCIS was locked down on us, and we had folks whose cases got frozen. But now, come to today, he's added to that. And I think these are things that he not only promised he's going to do, but I think we're actually equipped. I think we're prepared for this time around, the second time around, now that he's in office, to actually not necessarily approach this whole thing with a lot of fear, but actually kind of a zeal, kind of a sense of preparedness as organizers. So for one, he vows to deport millions who don't have authorization, documentation. I think the number was roughly like about 11 million with that.
Yeah, and in one interview of the guy who's gonna take over, I'm blanking out on his name. He was talking about it could be more than that, more than 20 million people. And when he was asked, well, what, are you going to deport the parents too of children who may have been born here? He's like, oh, easy. Let's just send the whole family back, including U.S. citizens.
Yeah. And I think that was, yeah. What is that, birthright citizenship that he wants to attack?
Yeah, birthright citizenship and naturalization.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so of this also, he even wants to he openly spoke and said that he even wants to remove people with legal status, like the Haitians, the TPS, temporary protected status holders. That these people are here legally, and do they have documentation even? So it's unauthorized folks, people without documentation, but also people that are documented. So there's a crazy precedence that's going to be set here. We've seen workplace raids when he was president. That was a first in this country when it was happening. And we will expect to see that again. There was military involvement then. So there's precedents already set that this is how that they will be used. So we can expect military involvement. He wants to set up camps, and these camps would expedite removal processes, without hearings for folks. So there's, removing due process within the what limited due process there already is for asylum seekers and refugees. I think his campaign also emphasized that such measures are within existing legal frameworks, and would not require any new legislation. So these guys, they're confident. They're vetted.
I have a question about that. What are those legal frameworks that those things exist in?
So Muslim ban exposed a few ways that they can actually play around this. I can't speak on like actual legal things, for instance, but we do know that, for instance, the Muslim ban, he is promising to bring that back. But they're not necessarily going to call it the Muslim ban. They're going to target the same 7 countries and call them terror-plagued countries, quote unquote. And they're going to implement, quote, implement strong ideological screenings for all immigrants. And so, again, like, these are tools that have been established many moons ago. We saw post in the Jim Crow era, post-slavery era, we saw literacy tests. We've seen the roots of that play dynamic roles throughout history since. How to find ways to exclude people. it's ironic because citizenship tests, and as well as like just the whole process of citizenship and gaining citizenship, allows people to basically better learn and understand like their process, their role that they want to play within this country, the meaning of becoming an American in this country. And I think in I can speak for Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, particularly in Washington, but Oregon, I think in the last 10 years had benefited with like, I think 90 billion in tax revenue. I think over the last decade from undocumented immigrants, because we have huge farm workers out here. We have farm workers and our hospitality industry as well. Yeah, it's pretty insane kind of like looking at this stuff, but I want people to understand none of this is going to be new. This is not this is going to be building upon what he started.
Let's put the one correction in there, that he didn't start any of this, right? These things were already on the table, designed and for rolling. I feel more like it's a 1-2 punch. My view is that they didn't want Kamala to win. The Democrats didn't want the presidency at this time because they already set us up for failure, which is having like the family marriage thing come out and then have it challenged. So we go sign up for these so-called benefits that will be challenged, and you get more undocumented people coming out the woodworks for this benefit that doesn't exist.
Yep.
Right. And then we could bring in the 1-2 punch and say we're going to deport these people because we have the data. So I don't think, like historically, just watching how they operate, the Muslim ban, calling them the Muslim ban. I think when Trump like says these things, when I look at people that have, large think tanks, right, and they think about it for a while and they come out and do it in such a way that calling the Muslim ban tells you it's a constitutional violation. Trying to do it again, rewording it to do it another way, right? After publicly saying, this is my racially motivated, right, or anti this religion motivated policies, right, sets a clear way for the court to deny this administration. So the courts, the system of checks and balance, I wouldn't be necessarily fearful of somebody threatening me with something. Everybody could talk big, right?
Right.
It's the action and how you take the action and what the courts do about those actions and how the people respond to it. So the setup of mass deportation, you saw the Democrats go to calling asylum seekers illegal aliens, right? Criminalize folks, taking on that narrative, adopting Trump's narratives, and start pushing this fear mongering and anti asylum seeker or anti-immigrant that affects all immigrants, right? Affects all people that migrated to this country that's been here. And some folks who have been here started to adopt that feeling because they haven't received the benefit, right, of getting the 9-digit number. So when you have that, would I be surprised that he's the president? Because I'm speaking to your emotions of your fear, right? You fear where this is headed, and Kamala basically didn't assuage those fears, right? She didn't say, well, this is what we're going to do this, right? I felt like it was a lot of, I'm a woman, I'm of color, vote for me, right? It's the same Biden rhetoric. Like, if you're not black if you don't vote for me. And people take that as a form of disrespect. You think you're entitled to this vote. And Trump is speaking to a different type of fear, right? He's speaking to, hey, your communities aren't safe. Hey, this is what's going to happen. This is how I'm going to protect you. So you're running into the arms of a quote unquote protector, because this is what you're feeling. This is the hate that you have for these other human beings that you want to express through this guy.
And I even think like the Democrats, particularly Harris campaign, they including Tim Walz, they were very good and they looked very confident. They were very happy and excited to do it, but they were leaning into the ridiculousness of the Republicans' rhetoric, rather than really stumping and standing on exactly what positive change and the next 4 years could look like under them. And it was hard for them to do that because we had the last 4 years where they didn't even do enough. I think the whole first half of Biden's campaign, he didn't even rescind Title 42, right? After Trump, we had 2 more years of Title 42 before they slowly rescinded that.
You didn't close private prisons.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't do these. You didn't close down the camps that Trump is saying that he's going to use. Geo is the camps that this administration will attempt to use. Biden didn't close down any of these camps. Right? This didn't happen. So from my experience, knowing like from the crack era and the crack laws and how Democrats and Republicans work together to do these things and set these precedents, we know that you are of the same cloth, right? You do the same things. We are watching the genocides happen. We're watching these things take place, and we're being silent to it. And we need to say, okay, we're active right now. How many calls have we received from people in the community saying, what are we going to do? Right? How are we going to do it? We didn't have those calls in the last 4 years.
Right. We didn't. That's true.
We could probably spend hours and hours and hours just talking about what's going to happen to the immigration system under the Trump administration. We're going to continue seeing the expansion, but what about the criminal justice system? I'm looking at some of the things that they're proposing around criminal justice, and it comes from the Project 2025 agenda, which is what they're going to use. Although they try to distance themselves, the very people that are around him are the ones that put together Project 2025, and that include stopping by any means, any sort of reform to the criminal justice system. It proposes aggressive use of RICO statutes, an interstate drug prosecution, including for simple possessions. I mean, that alone, is going to open the floodgates, in terms of like who's going to get put behind bars. They're talking about politicize every component of the Department of Justice with people that are loyal to Donald Trump, and they're gonna follow this agenda, and they're gonna use what you both were saying, fear, right? The fear that there's much more crime, there's more crime, there's more crime, there's more crime, and this particular group of people are committing a crime, or this particular group of people will be committing crime because now we can predict that with our technology. And I think that's a huge element that has been so overlooked. And I think we're going to dig deeper in future episodes of this podcast, is how technology has been used to exacerbate, that intersection of the criminal justice system and the immigration system. What technology that is used to keep, helping law enforcement go after our people, right? Although the technology is biased, although a lot of times the data is incorrect, and the algorithms that are used for some of the technology are very biased and used by people that don't look like you and I. And so, just take a look at who's around pushing JD Vance to run for vice president. Big tech is around, and they're salivating into the idea of how much more money they're going to get to push the technology into law enforcement and possibly other institutions. I mean, data alone is a huge, huge industry, and this is only going to get worse. And I'm worried that, like personal data, your rights of your personal data are just going to be one of those things that is just going to go, probably going to end up in the Supreme Court, and they'll be like, no, the government has the right to look into all of your personal data. Although, like Karim has said in the past, you're already giving your data away, with this thing, with your phone, with your smartphone. So it'd be interesting to see how much they get to spend on that, but how much money big tech and other companies are gonna make out of this. But I want to hear from Kay. You know, Kay, like, what do you think are the lessons? Or how do you what did you hear from people? What do we hear from people? You know, in reaction to what happened? During this election.
I think I have like a few different feelings, but I think particularly when I think about like the election in general, I think sorry, I'm having I think that folks are kind of ready to like connect and like figure out what the next steps are as far as like now we're here, right? So now that Trump, he is the next elected president, so folks are really trying to figure out like what do we do next? How do we stay tapped in? How can we like organize? How can we stay connected? I think unfortunately this is a difficult conversation, but I think like if Kamala would have won, I don't know think how folks would have wanted to stay engaged into the work, right? Because some
Right.
folks are really just every 4 years, oh, okay, I'm going to vote, and then that's kind of where my like politic kind of stops. So I think a lot of folks are really ready to do something, and I think regardless of whoever would have became like would have been elected during this election, we should have still had that energy. So I'm kind of excited to see like how folks show up and show out in this moment.
I mean, that's a massive point in itself right there. During the last 4 years where things were getting steadily more and more difficult for immigrants being criminalized, we saw. Personally, I saw, speaking in I statements, I saw difficulty in being able to convene in coalition spaces progressively. A lot of spaces that I was in was filled with individuals, and as individuals, we weren't powerful enough. We didn't have organizational support, for instance, and I'm grateful for Freedom to Thrive for being an organization that's really been standing out there and being like, we need to organize. We're going to work with Harvard on the Crimmigration Clinic to advance a toolkit. And there are folks within that organize within the Masa communities, but it's not been urgent, right? And I think nothing brings out your tools better than seeing the fire burn right in your face. we're there now. We're ready to like call in our engines and get the hoses out and put it out. But want to kind of jump into the immigration timeline a little bit as well, and what to expect, dates and times, before we kind of pop into a couple of our segments over here. But I think just to kind of crater this topic, just a couple other things to kind of touch on. We will expect to see in the Trump campaign, they listed plans already. This is documented, plans to send immigration agents to protests in the U.S. to remove pro-jihadist, air quotes, demonstrators from the country, and to revoke student visas of radical anti-American and anti-Semitic foreigners at universities. That is going to be something that we have to organize around and build momentum. And we've done this before. We've organized around issues like this, but this time, we're talking about a party that says the quiet part out loud now. They live that. And that's one very big targeting campaign promise there. They already created migrant protection protocols in his first administration, which was a remain in Mexico policy. And we'll see advancements around that. They've promised it, requiring asylum seekers to await court appointments in Mexico's. We're going to see that get worse. That's something the last 4 years could have been fixed, could have been alleviated, wasn't. Absolutely. I'm here in the Northwest. I remember vigilantism and a rise in militias, far right embedded militias and vigilantism here in the Northwest from 2015. And then as soon as Trump hit those golden escalators, these guys got so emboldened, and it was just a shit show up here in the Pacific Northwest. But very emblematic, and you saw it happen across the country. Um, Invoking the Alien Enemies Act is another thing that they've talked about and they've promised. Invoking the Enemy Aliens Act of 1798 and the Insurrection Act. He plans to deploy federal troops to assist in apprehending migrants at the southern border, a move that raises serious legal and ethical concerns regarding the role of military and domestic law enforcement. He's promising 10,000 new Border Patrol agents. He wants to have a 50% larger Border Patrol with congressional approval. The irony is that even with this current administration, they've been promising to do that, and they tried to do it with 1,500, not just 10,000, 1,500. And you want to know what the obstacle was to that? Why they weren't even able to get, just increase, not even the 1,500, because that didn't pass. Trump told his right-wing Congress to step back, wait for him. But the fact that they can't even just work on their current numbers and keep those supported is because of low morale in their forces. So I think it's a benefit of people like us that organize, that don't let these human beings who trade in their sense of humanity for a job to get away with it. And I think that's effective organizing. And that's where we'll come in again. And also, just an example of how it's already even started. A judge on Thursday struck down a Biden administration policy that aimed to ease a path to citizenship for some undocumented migrants who are married to U.S. citizens. That just happened yesterday. And so, we've talked about, like, this is what we can expect. And there'll be more things, but I think this is pretty much the whole pie that we can really focus on. And we've talked about how Biden took his time. Half of his entire last term was just allowing Title 42 to roll and then slowly rescind it. He has yet to implement bans on asylum, or actually, he implemented bans on asylum claims at the southern borders. That's Biden, right? This is not very progressive at all. And he continued building the wall, right? Still going up. And just everything that we were hearing about build a wall and the Democratic rhetoric when they weren't in power at that presidential level, where was it? So, I think where hope is, that's definitely looking down the barrel, right? It's very threatening to a lot of folks out there. But I think for us as organizers, what action could look like is not necessarily reinventing a wheel. This work has been done before in many different ways during his first presidency. And I think the key is first going to be rebuilding on coalition work. As you had stated, Kay, that appetite is going to be there now because we are literally dealing with the worst of the two evils. So, but I can speak, for example, here in the Pacific Northwest, one of the things that we faced was Trump had pulled all federal funding from resettlement agencies here in the U.S. And particularly here in Oregon, what we wound up doing is that we passed a bill, HB 2508 in 2018. In the state of Oregon. It was a stopgap funding for resettlement agencies and case management, because what happened is that when you pull that federal funding, they were threadbare. They only had a budget reserve that would push them for 6 to 9 months for a couple others. And so we had passed that. So I think state protections through local legislation is going to be huge. Focusing on the next long-term session, I think that's going to be one of the most vital things that we can actually focus on right now. This next long-term session is going to I would encourage a lot of coalition building right now, and joining and making sure that we're organized in that process. Organizing legal advocacy for regional coalitions, I think that would be really important when it comes to being able to develop tools for KYRs, know your rights, in multiple ways. You had mentioned that, Edwin, earlier. And direct action rooted in awareness of educational campaigns. Direct action, man, it works. You get people out there, you get people to be able to understand, okay, yes, if things are going to get worse, what are you going to do? Sit on your ass? And when you get people out there, we have zines, we have ways, tools to be able to educate people. We're building workshops, these KYRs that we want people to come into. So I think that's kind of like a good three-prong approach to be able to kind of like remind folks that yes, we are empowered. We're not damsels in distress, so to speak, when it comes to this administration.
The one,
But
the one thing I'll add, because I know we have to move on and talk about other things, is that hopefully this is something that I've been thinking about for the longest time. Because when I think about organizing and working with folks who are impacted, like my neighbors, my family, is that all the money that gets spent in the electoral cycles could be used and invested to organize people. If a quarter of the money was used to organize our people, I think we'll be having a different conversation. So I'm hoping that foundations, nonprofits, for-profits that call themselves progressive should really think about how folks who are trying to fight back, who are trying to challenge these things, and hopefully see the light or a better future, think about that too, because unfortunately,
how they gonna grease their pockets then?
we've been programmed that all the money needs to go to elections, but then they forget about what happens between the election and the next year or whatever. But I do want to make a plug. So if you want to get involved with us, you can get in touch with us, through our link tree, and you can see it on the screen. You can sign up for a newsletter, etc.
get on the newsletter, people. Get on the newsletter. I think one of the great tidbits on a newsletter, and I'm not even going to say what it is right now. We'll just get into it when we get to the Crimmigration Corner, one of our segments. But it was a big feature on our newsletter as well. So get on the newsletter; it's awesome.
Yeah, get on social media. Y'all got to drop that link as well. I just wanted to add to what some of I've said, like things that I've been saying for quite some time. When administrations pass programs or put programs out that are supposed to be beneficial to immigrant communities, like DACA, parole in place, these programs are always challenged by some sheriff in Texas, right? And we as organizers or lawyers that organize with us, they are not challenging those rulings in New York or California, right? They're letting Texas, like, what do you think is going to happen in Texas? Right? What do you think the outcome is going to be in Texas? That this program is not constitutional and that Biden doesn't have a right to do it. Then this program now will become a DACA, right? We'll have to fight all the way to the Supreme Court to get that benefit. That's what we have ahead of us. And just asking organizers to be more strategitic about the approach and less emotional, because everything that we've seen is about emotion. The entire election reminds me of Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather when they were promoting their fight. It's just a bunch of racial slurs, mudslinging, and you lose sight of what's real, because you're in an emotional state and reacting to that versus being proactive for what's beneficial to you in your day to day. And we have to harness one of the things that we saw with Obama, right? This is a point that I was in ICE detention when Obama was leaving office, and they created memorandums and policies to hike up deportations before they left. A lot of that was blamed on Trump, but the policies and the memos came out before Trump left, came into office, and we have to be mindful of that happening right now so we can protect people in detention and try to do our best to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right.
Before the new year.
Yeah, the Muslim ban was a giant lever that was built by the Obama administration. And all he had to go in there was just pull it.
Yeah, that's why they did the brief before they changed power, right? Like, this is what's up next. You're the new president of the corporation. This is what you have to do in your first 100 days, right? I left the work for you. Now go do it, right? Yep. And this is how it works. Just like smooth, for what they call smooth transitions of power, right? And just to keep the agenda going. So we have to know that. And speaking to what Kay said, is we became individuals again under the Biden administration. We had our individual agendas. When Trump was in office, we had one enemy, right? One cause, one enemy. We don't want that to happen again after this is over with, right? After this time, we don't want to splinter back out into individual agendas. I think that's how we lost a lot of our base, where we say our work, right, is strictly on immigration and certain people of certain colors and certain backgrounds. And then when we say things like that, we lose some of the support that we had from marginalized communities that supported us in that time outside for DACA, outside on the front lines, and they're struggling too. We haven't built these bridges, or we let those bridges fall apart. So they went to the other side.
Yeah. Well, Edwin, carry us on through the election timeline now, man. What do we expect timeline wise right now?
Man, I think at this point it's just just get ready. Get ready. I can't even say anything about what the election timeline is. Like how could you have a conversation? We know who won. We know what their plan is, and when he gets inaugurated in January, the first day they're gonna come out with all kinds of executive actions. I mean, I don't even think, like, I know we plan to have some sort of a sense of what's gonna happen, but we kind of know what's gonna happen after January.
Yeah, well, at least we're not going to have an insurrection.
Yeah.
But yeah, leading up to that, in November, I think the next key date to be practical with a numerical here and visual with the timeline, November 26th, for one, the Trump sentencing for the New York hush money trial begins. That's going to be very interesting. Right before he gets inaugurated for president a couple months later. But more key to the actual election in itself, December 11th, states will officialize their electoral college vote. It's a constitutional process that's set in stone. And then what follows that constitutional process, December 17th, which is the Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December. Again, a constitutional mandate of some sort for this process. The electors meet in their respective state capitals in the District of Columbia to formally vote for president and vice president. That's December 17th. And then what comes after that is January 6th. Nobody really ever paid attention too much to January 6th until the insurrection. So thank you, insurrection. Thank you, Trump, for that. Now we'll always remember exactly what January 6th supposed to do. And if some of you guys were caught into what actually happened and not what it was actually for, here it is. Electoral votes formally counted before a joint session of Congress. The President of the United States formally announces the electoral result. And then finally, January 20th, what I called hell in an orange handbasket, we get a new president. Trump gets inaugurated for the second time in the U.S., becomes number 47. So he'll be 45 before and 47 now. And that's it.
Man, all that sounds very.
That's it for the whole election subject. Let's move on.
we gotta talk about something uplifting, and maybe that's a good segue for our next section of the episode, which we call Crimmigration Corner. And I'm gonna hand it over to Karim because I know you gotta give us at least some kind of hope, man.
I want to have like one of those Charlemagne things where I can drop one of Clue's bombs moment.
DJ Freedom, aka Smart. Boom. But drop one of Clue's bombs for this case. So this case is Jack v. Barr. I actually don't want to talk about Jack v. Barr. I want to talk about the recent ruling from Texas, but we're going to save that for our next session. What I'm going to talk about is
tell us what's the gist of Jack v. Barr.
The gist of Jack v. Barr is a case from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which governs the area of New York and parts of Connecticut. Jack v. Barr deals with simple gun possession. What it states is that the New York state statutes do not match up with the federal statutes. And for immigration, all immigration are federal issues, federal statutes. So the state laws for the violations, how they criminalize it, it has to match up in order for them to use it as the grounds for removal. So everybody that has a New York gun possession charge, basically, if you were removed on a New York gun possession charge, you can now come back to the United States once you reopen your removal hearing. So the tens of thousands of people who are deported from New York for gun possession can now come back into the country, because this technicality says the definition of a firearm under the New York state statute is too broad and doesn't match the federal definition. So it's not a gun.
Word.
Wait. I'm probably gonna be sarcastic. Are you
bring it back? Come rewind.
Are you giving us legal advice?
No, I am not giving you legal advice. I'm giving you case analysis. I'm summarizing what the case said. Just like,
but what's the impact? I mean, like, how does it? Why does that matter for people that are actually, having to fight, gun charges and maybe in deportation proceedings?
Well, that's what they use to deport you. When you go through immigration proceedings, they usually use, hey, you violated this criminal status. So the statute, therefore, you violated your immigration status. So if you're a green card holder, if you were undocumented, if you were on a visa and you were convicted of a gun charge in the state of New York, and they use that for the grounds of removability to say that you can no longer come to the U.S. One of the things, okay, let's do this. Vybz Kartel, right? The Jamaican superstar why he hasn't been in the U.S. prior to his incarceration was because of a gun possession case. That gun possession case is now invalid. So now he can come back and do shows in America because they cannot use that gun possession as a bar to enter the country.
So that's like what they call case precedence, right?
Case precedence.
That's a precedent, so that way it brings meaning for new cases coming down the road.
Yes, and old
talk to us about that.
And old cases. So if you were removed 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, you can reopen your case because it invalidated that order of deportation.
So that's huge, because retroactive.
Yes, retroactive.
Meaning like retroactive precedents, like that's huge.
Yes,
that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen often.
It doesn't happen often, and that's why it's important for lawyers to challenge these things. We wouldn't have Jack v. Barr if nobody challenged it, right? If nobody said this statute doesn't apply to us because it doesn't meet the federal definition, it's overbroad. Similarly, you have folks now who sometimes they'll say you can't become a U.S. citizen or you can't come into the country because you have a conviction in another country. Does that conviction in that other country meet the federal statutes and the guidelines that USCIS and ICE and EOIR have to follow? This case may go into criminal proceedings on a federal level, saying this is unconstitutional because you use my New York State gun possession to enhance me or career me out and give me more time. But we do say contact your attorney, read, research, get some information, go get advice from an attorney, because I am not an attorney and I'm not giving legal advice. I'm giving you my interpretation and what I would do if I'm in that situation.
Word. Yeah. So I think in the newsletter, this again, if you guys can find an archive of our newsletter on our website, and this was something that we covered in our last issue in October. Again, if you want to read more about it, definitely find it there. It's Jack V. Barr and its impact on gun convictions in New York. The case, what it means for new cases, what about old cases, why this matters. You guys heard it here today. You can definitely read about it by subscribing to our newsletter.
The Immigration Defense Project, IDP, in New York, idp.org, they also have a workshop on this and motion templates for you to put in your motion to reopen on the Jack V. Barr in the BIA. So,
and what's the BIA?
Board of Immigration Appeals.
Nice. Perfect. Word. Well, that wraps up our little segment right there for Crimmigration Corner. This is the first of many times we're going to revisit the Crimmigration Corner. Karim actually has a wealth of knowledge as well as access to a lot of case precedents that has been set and are currently taking place. We're not lawyers over here. We're not trying to give legal advice, but we're definitely trying to let folks know exactly what's happening out there, what has happened out there, and kind of give a little topical analysis of like how this is going to affect things moving forward and how we kind of continue the fight and what the fight even looks like when it comes to a legal basis. But to close us out, the final segment that we kind of go into is what we call of the month. And of the month could be preceded by whatever could be related to prosecution of immigrants and in that entire genre of crimmigration. In this tech, I gave it away. It's tech, but in this one, we're actually Crimmigration Tech of the Month. I was blessed for Edwin to be able to share something with us on what's called the Veritech watch system. And so I put up a few bullet points to kind of hit up over here. It's not going to be a broad conversation, but just more food for thought for us before we actually close out. The Very Watch system, it's wrist-worn device administered by ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. It's kind of building upon the whole ankle monitor system. They're trying to kind of stylize it, but what really does is it actually broadens and expands the criminal legal system instead of reducing or replacing it with a process that can actually work better. Criminalizing immigrants is not exactly how you want to deal with the immigration system. That just allows us to politically use them as a straw man continuously. And we get caught up in that rhetoric, and we have to find a way to fight and get away from that rhetoric so we can actually find true resolutions and true ideas and true things to talk about. And the Democrats as a party, they're going to continue to lose, just like they just lost a landslide. They had a feather under their cap in the last election against Trump when he actually won in 2020 or 2016. because he didn't win the popular vote. Well, guess what? Now you lost by the popular vote. So the truth, things need to change, and hopefully we can banner these issues and kind of stand out a little bit more credibly. But they can't make this type of tech and expand it and say that they're actually going to better the criminal legal system when they're just trying to stuff it in. This wrist-worn device started as a pilot from 50 units to 3,000 units. It advanced in 1 year. It's additional to the SmartLink app, which is an app that tracks migrants nationwide. The government's given folks a cell phone just to be able to make sure that they have an app handy on them, so that way they can track exactly where these migrants are, and under the guise of like, this is how you manage your case. But really, it's just more AI tech that's being implemented, particularly one that's implementing facial recognition tech in this stuff as well, which we should be trying to get away from. But again, where you see Black and brown people suffering, you're going to see more reason to experiment with them and kind of broaden a criminalizing system. So a lot of this stuff is also evolving to track biometrics such as heart rate and cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. Why track the stress hormone? Again, they say that they argue that.
What does that have to do with our immigration system? What does that
Yeah.
have to do with the criminal justice system? Like, why would the government want to have my vital signs?
I feel like they want to turn these folks into lab rats. Now they say, and this guy named Dr. Marcus, who's one of the researchers, argued that the combination of health and location data helps identify individuals who are currently on parole and under stress and likely to get involved in risky behaviors that can increase the likelihood of recidivism. I call bullshit. They're literally turning us into lab rats, literally like experimenting, seeing what stresses people out and carrying that data. And speaking of data that goes into big data, we know that big data is out there. It's collecting our information, and now it actually wants to understand the emotional state of these people and what they're subjecting them to, and not and do it with pure and utter impunity and apathy. Under this administration, this current administration, the Biden administration, the use of surveillance technology is ballooned. According to reporting from last summer by the Fast Company, there were about 80,000 immigrants living under some form of digital surveillance before President Joe Biden took office. Advocates now believe the current number is over 200. Yes, sir. And revenues in prison industry for electronic monitoring rose 78% between 2021 and 2022. 78%. We talked about no tech for ICE in our first episode with Palantir and Peter Thiel. This is that. And finally, there's an absence of nationwide reporting requirements and national surveys that makes it difficult to even assess the total number of immigrants under our digital surveillance. So this is a whole lab experiment. Again, like I said, these tech expand criminal legal systems that reduce or replace, or instead of reducing or replace, the friendlier package the friendlier package they hope brings less scrutiny that it hopes to not face, instead of breaking down these forms of tech that are entrenching structural inequities and inequalities. So that's it. That's our Crimmigration Tech of the Month. We're highlighting the Very Watch system. Thank you, Edwin, for bringing that up to me this week.
Thank you, Edwin.
Who's going to close us out?
Okay. I say we ask Kay.
You open us up and you shut it down, Kay.
Okay. All right.
Do the dishes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you all subscribe to our newsletter, like CMOB and Karim brought up a little bit earlier. And also check us out for our next episode.
Thank you.
Episode 3 to be determined. Thank you, guys.
Thank you and peace.
Peace.